All right, everybody. Well, welcome to another episode of Live from My Drum Room. I have a really, really special show today. My guest is an old friend of mine, and I really mean that. We've known each other a long, long time. He's the son of legendary drummer Larrie Londin, Sean Gallant London, and we've been trying to make this happen for some time, and I'm glad we finally managed to make it happen today. But without further ado, please welcome Sean Gallant London.
You put me in that little room off to the side, and it killed me over there.
That's
It's
what
okay,
happens. Hey, did you like the
you know.
munchies I had in there for you? Everybody likes when I put them in the
Yeah,
green
yeah,
room.
they were good. Yeah,
Yeah. You didn't mind that there were green M&Ms in that bowl. It's no.
no, it was okay. I some of them look more like mellow yellow color, but they were okay.
Well, it's great to see you. And by the way, I didn't tell you this during the sound check, but I'm going to let you do most of the heavy lifting today because you're
Oh
I
God.
no, I should have told you that ahead of time, but then you might not have been willing to
Okay.
do this today. But no, I just
Okay.
I'm long overdue. We're long overdue having this conversation today, and I so appreciate you being here and taking time. And your dad, as you can see by the response from everybody, that we've got a whole bunch of people watching. Your dad was such an influence, was so important to everybody, and I'm so glad we're doing this. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad somebody wants to hear about him. So it's been
Absolutely.
33 years, so
I know.
long
I know.
time.
I know.
So
Yeah. Yep. But I tell you, your dad recorded so many great songs. I mean, he's made such a mark in music that like all the greats that aren't with us anymore, he's left a legacy and something to be really proud of.
yeah, I think the biggest thing that I think that he left with most was that, which I wish there was still more of from that time period. And drummers used to be, and still some of them are, they were more family oriented. You never saw a lot of guitar players hanging out, sharing
Yeah.
ideas and tricks and all that. Drummers would sit down and share everything, like what heads they were using, why, how they were tuning, snare beds, everything. Because they knew that you could take any drummer's drum set and put any drummer on it, and that drum set would immediately sound like the drummer that was playing it because they all hit the drums a certain way and got certain sounds out of it. And so they always knew that it was like, I can give you everything that I know about drums and drumming, but you're never going to play like me because you're not going to think to play what I would play in this situation. And
Right.
that was a family thing, but it was like, you watch some of the greatest sitting there at NAMM shows just trading licks, or Jim Chapin and Ted Stein sitting there one hand each, and they're playing, and it's like Ted's playing with his left hand, and you know Jim's playing with his right hand, and they're playing rudiments and having a conversation with other people walking up and still playing the rudiment. They
Right.
weren't
Right.
concentrating, and it was just like, and the tempo would go up and down and whatever, and they keep trying to mess each other up. That's the type of relationship Dad had with even a child walking up. He would share everything he could with them, and I don't see as much of that anymore. But we don't have those clinics anymore. Everybody's in video now, so.
Yeah.
And
No,
that's why
you're
I love
right.
your show. And I love the fact that the interaction that you have with a lot of the drummers, and that where they share the things that they used to do in person at trade shows or clinics or all of that, kind of like when you were saying you were at the Zildjian Day in '83, and I'm like, oh, I remember that show, or that sort of thing, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it was just a different time period. That's a
Absolutely,
fun
Sean.
picture.
That's a great picture. And when you mentioned Jim Chapin, perfect segue to show that photo, which I wanted to show everybody. And of course, Dom Famularo and your dad. But you're right. You made a good point too. There's such a drum community. Even though clinics aren't so much of a thing anymore, the drum community is still there, and it's I think it's still really strong. And what I think is really cool about there's so many cool things about your dad, but he was, I think, one of the early pioneers of an incredible, successful studio musician, or or just musician, whether it was studio touring, because he toured, he played with lots of bands, toured on the road as well as recording with bands. But he was one of the early pioneers of blending education with that. Like you say, doing drum clinics and Zildjian Day 1983. Those were still really the early days of drum clinics. They'd only really
Hmm.
started a few years before that, really in any sort of, sort of commercial way. Late 70s, I think, really was when things like that really started to happen. And your dad, boy, we're going to talk about that Zildjian Day Boston, but every drummer that I knew that was there that day, every single one of them, I'm going to just say this, and like I said, we're going to come back to it, but it was like your dad, it was genius the way he planned what he was going to play, because no one had any idea what was coming when your dad came out and played that day. I certainly didn't.
Hmm.
I don't think I knew who he was at that point. I certainly did after that, and I made a point of, trying to find different things. And then, of course, like everything else, you start finding all these things that he was on. You know what I mean? Once it sort of gets your attention, you realize. And then it was a year after that he was on the Steve Perry record, and I think that really brought a lot of notoriety. But he was such a master at all these different styles of playing. And again, I'm going to turn it over to you in a second, but I know he really sort of got his start in Motown, right? I mean, that was really the sort of beginning for him, or
Yeah,
early.
he started in 57 playing, and he was like 14, 15. Um, and uh, he actually was, he never graduated high school. He dropped out in the eighth grade because of his family and that. And um, the band director there didn't, he told my dad that he would never play drums or anything because he said he wasn't musically inclined. But I found out just the other day there's a great utility player in Nashville named Charlie McCoy who his vocal coach in high school was married to the band director that told dad he couldn't play back when they were in Miami Hialeah. And but back in that time period, dad was washing dishes in a nightclub restaurant, and the guitar player from the band came in and said, "Hey, does anybody know how to play drums?" And dad said, "What's it pay?" And the Bobby at the time said, "It pays 50 a week." Dad goes, "I play drums." So dad went, and didn't have a drum set. Really didn't know anything but one beat at the time, and was playing the tabletop because he didn't have drums. So he was just playing the top of the table. And eventually he ended up with getting a snare drum and a cymbal, and finally, kept borrowing drum sets, and then finally got a Ludwig kit, and, you know, it progressed from there. But he was still too young to play in clubs. And that's when the bass player who had joined the band after dad, named Eugene Bunton, became Lonnie London. And my dad, Ralph Gallant, became Larrie London
Mhm.
because Eugene was 5 years older. So, dad being 15 at the time, Eugene was 20, he became the illegitimate brother. And so it was, he had a guardian per se to watch over him in the clubs, but, and that's how it all started. And they were the Tornadoes at that time. And then they became the Headliners when the owner of the group left, and the four of them just became the headliners. And in 63, 64, they were doing a WXYZ television station thing that Diana Ross and the Supremes were doing. And she saw the headliners doing their thing and said, are you signed with anybody or that? And that's how they ended up getting signed to Motown at that time, was because of Diana Ross.
Wow.
But they had done so much choreography for the band because they were a lounge act doing all kinds of stuff. And they were in all the suits were exactly the same. They were like, they had turquoise suits and blue suits and tangerine suits and whatever, but it was always, and the zippers were on the side, and it was always clean, very clean cut looking things, but they would choreograph their dancing and whatever on stage while they were playing. And Barry Gordy came to them and said, what should we do with our groups? And that's when he was like, Lonnie and them said, you need to choreograph them so that they're all dancing together and they look like they're together, and instead of them all just doing their thing. And it was the same time when Mom was fixing one of Diana Ross's dresses because it was, falling apart, and Mom stitched it back together right before they were to show up on the WXYZ TV. Just a lot of things that were going on during that time. Everybody was doing, a little bit of everything just to try and make it in the business.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And you guys had not moved to Nashville yet. This was still
oh no, everybody
early
met
60s.
in the full band was actually together by 61, and they were in Tampa and Fort Lauderdale. And then the band was traveling all over, and they, were in Boston for a period of time, in New York for a period of time, and then they ended up in Detroit. And then in 69, Dad had left the band and joined Chet Atkins, Floyd Kramer, and Boots Randolph in the Festival of Music touring. And they would all be playing, and there was a couple of shows where Roy Clark would come in and sing or do different things. But, that was, late 60s into the early 70s,
Mhm.
even to the point where Boots didn't show up in time to start his show. So Chet told Dad to go out and sing, and because he knew Dad sang, and Dad went out and sang with the symphony, and Boots came in and was pissed and told them that he was no longer allowed to sing because there was no way he was going on after Dad was singing. So it was just, it's just all the time periods of craziness during that, those
Wow.
years.
Yeah. What
But
I had,
Dad was also being signed to Atlantic Records at the same time as a soloist as when he was signed to Motown. But
right,
he stayed with
as
the
a
band
singer.
because the band gave him a shot. So he decided to stay with the band and gave up the Atlantic Records deal.
Yeah. I had no idea that he was, that he was a singer until somewhat recently when I really started to dig deep. And his career as a drummer obviously is so prolific. And um, again, just
Well, at one of the clinics, they asked him why he played certain things that he played, during sessions. And Dad said, he goes, I play what I would want a drummer to play if I was singing the song. And he goes, because I'm singing the song with the vocalist in my head as I'm playing, so that I'm staying
yeah,
away or out of the way of the vocal. He goes, I'm there to accompany the vocal, not be the lead instrument.
yeah,
It's so
yeah.
that's why it was like I always wanted to build a pocket that the vocalists knew that they were surrounded and loved, not beat up. you
Yeah, no,
know?
again, a true musician. Yeah. I mean, he fully understood the idea of supporting the song as the drummer, and not, as we all know now, and your dad had enough chops to hang with anybody, and could have, he used his chops, his used his superpowers for good versus evil.
Yeah.
I mean, he really supported the songs when he played, which is
And I think that came
right.
about due to all the years that they were the headliners because they were doing everything from Broadway songs to rock songs to blues to Dixieland jazz to you name it. I mean, the band even bought trumpets at one time, and they were all standing out front playing Dizzy Gillespie trumpets for a
Mm.
part of a song, and then they go back and slowly start playing again. But it was just all the different genres that they had to cover, and it's he was like, as long as you kept the customers seated and they weren't all talking, he goes, then you had them, emotionally involved in the band. He goes, as soon as the crowd is talking more than they're listening, he goes, you're just background music,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you could be music for all that at that point,
Yeah.
and going back to a great thing that, he got from, it's a saying that he got from, you know, Barry Gordy, and it was like, there's only two types of music, good or bad. He goes, and all music is dance music. He goes, it's you're either dancing vertically, horizontally, or emotionally. And he goes, and if you're not doing one or all of those three, he goes, you're not playing anything worth listening to. You know,
Yeah.
but
Very astute. So let me jump back a second, Sean. And you mentioned that he had spent some time up here in Boston, and I'm guessing that's where he met your mom because she's from.
no, no,
It's not.
mm-mm.
Okay. No.
No. My mom and dad met in a club called the Banyan Club, which is in Fort Lauderdale.
Ah,
And you used to
okay.
walk through the middle of a banyan tree because banyan trees would grow up and then grow back into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the doorway, you're walking through this huge banyan, tree ensemble. And that's where they met. Mom was a flight attendant for Mackey Airlines, and dad was playing in the group. And she and the other flight attendants and the pilots had gone into this bar to have drinks or whatever, and the owner of the bar that they knew that came up and said, you got to see these guys in the back, they're hilarious, and blah blah blah. So they went back, and Lonnie is up there playing bass, playing lead singer at the time. Bobby's hanging upside down from a trapeze bar, swinging back and forth, playing guitar. Dad's playing drums. They got, I think Ray Clayton was playing organ at the time, and they were all laughing because they were in shorts and short shorts and Hawaiian shirts and whatever until they finally later found that they needed to dress more appropriately and be choreographed and all this other mess. But that's where they met. And then mom, that I think dad was still 15 at the time, and then they dated, and then mom didn't find out dad was 3 years later. Dad said they were in Chicago, and he said, if you want to get married, come up here. He goes, and let's get married. He goes, if not, then because they were tired of dating around or whatever.
Long distance.
And
Yeah.
so she goes up there to Chicago. They go in front of the justice of the peace, and he has to call dad's mom, my grandmother, to be married because in Chicago, DuPage County, you had to be 21 without parent consent.
Mm-hmm.
So dad was just 18. Mom was 21.
Ah, okay.
And so mom's like, you're not. She all that time thought he was the same age. So yeah, that went over well.
Oh man.
But then they moved to Boston because mom's family is from Boston.
Yeah.
And
Revere, right? Revere,
they
Mass.
yeah, Revere
That's where my
and
mom's from, by the way. Yeah.
North Revere and Saugus, Mass.
Can I
And
can I ask what year your mom was born?
mom was born in 1940.
40. Okay, so
Dad was born in 43.
yeah, okay. My mom was born in 32. I thought maybe they were they could have known each other,
No.
but my mom was older. Yeah.
Well, my
Okay.
mom didn't stay in Florida. She ended up, in Boston. She ended up going to high school in Fort Lauderdale because her parents split.
I see.
Um,
Okay.
but mom's whole side of the family, either they were on the police force or being thrown into jail by the police force. And
Yep.
so her her cousins were managing the Four Aces and the Kingsman Trio and Ted Williams and all of that back in the day, and that's why it's like, I've found the picture again, but there is an old picture of Ted Williams pushing me around in a stroller,
Oh my God.
through the park. But they were the ones that were instigating on what the band needed to do to move forward, and helped dad quite a few times in situations that were not so good.
Yeah, I'll bet. I just have to tell
That's
you,
more for a private story.
yeah, that'll be a private story. The first time I met your dad, when I actually had a chance to talk to him, which I'll get to in a minute, but I remember. Well, I'll back up. The Zildjian Day Boston you're talking about, 1983. He acknowledged your mom being there. He said, "My
Hmm.
wife Debbie's here," and I think he must have acknowledged you and your brother being there. Were both of you guys there at that Zildjian Day
Hmm.
Boston? Yeah, okay. I remember
Hmm.
him, but I remember him pointing out that his wife was from Revere, Mass, which was being at Berkeley in Boston, it was, I thought, oh wow, my mom's from. But when I met him years later, and I told him, I remembered him saying that, and that I was originally from Boston. This was up when I was living in LA. And he said, and you, of course, your dad had such a
Yep.
great sense of humor. He said something like, "You don't sound like you're from Boston," or something like that. How come you don't say "park the car"? And
God,
and yeah, he was, but he just sort of looked at me and went like, "Really?" And I said, "Well, I don't, whatever." But it was just a funny, sort of a bonding moment for us at that point.
yeah.
But he was. I mean,
No,
that's what I
because
remember was he had a great sense of humor. Just
well, every time that he would go through there, it was like dad would go up to the Revere area and get food because, the whole families are up there. So it was like, they would say, well, we're going to go to this restaurant. He's like, no, I'm going up to see family. I'm going to go get some real food. And, because he's like, the family cooks better than the restaurant. And,
oh yeah,
and one
yeah.
time he took the whole band with him and they went to my great aunt's house and she put out a spread and they were like they called for the tour bus to come over and pick them up and they just unloaded her whole refrigerator and everything into the bus, because it was like they were like, we're done eating all that crap for the
Oh
next
man,
week,
that's great. Yeah, they ate
so
like kings for a week.
yes.
Oh man, that's great. Um, so let's fast forward a little bit. So moved to Nashville in '69,
Hmm.
and that was is to work with Chet Atkins mainly, but that opened the door to doing sessions. Obviously, that was
Hmm.
maybe just like a unintended natural progression that happened because things were opening up there. And
Well, dad was going to leave the industry completely. He was going to go back to doing carpentry,
really,
and Chet said no, come to Nashville. So Chet brought him to Nashville, um, because Chet and Boots and all of them had worked with my dad during all those PGA tours because they would be the dinner act and the headliners would be the cocktail evening act. And they would sit there, Chet would sit and watch them play and, whatever. And he was like, you really need to come to Nashville. And dad was like, he wasn't going to do it at first. And, but then he moved and then Chet started trying to help him get onto session work besides just being a live touring player.
yeah,
Um, and that's when, some of the early stuff, he ended up doing some stuff with Jerry Reed and then it went to Dolly and he'd also done an early era, late era Everly Brothers thing, um, album and just a bunch of different odd pieces. And it slowly the door started opening. But when he first moved to Nashville, he was sweeping floors at RCA and Columbia.
jeez,
So, but it
amazing.
was
I
just,
mean,
and then at night he would play downtown and Printer's Alley at the Carousel Club, or Skulls, which was Chet's place for a while, because that's where Chet basically would work, every week unless he was out doing a show. But
And, yeah. And when he moved, do you remember, Sean? I know you were pretty young when you guys moved there. Was a lot of the work at the time in Nashville, like, was Buddy Harmon doing a lot of that work?
Buddy, well, you had Buddy, you had Jerry Kerrigan, you had
Yeah.
Gene Chrisman, you had Kenny Malone, you had uh, I can't think of, there's a bunch of other ones that came in. Roger Hawkins would come up from Muscle Shoals,
Hmm.
which is
Yeah.
another. I mean, there was a lot of guys that drummers today, when they listen to old tracks, they've heard all of these guys,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they don't realize who they are because they never, like Roger never wanted to leave Muscle Shoals. He would come up
Hmm.
to Nashville and do stuff, but he never wanted to go touring. He never wanted to be out playing all over the place. They did
Yeah.
that once as the Muscle Shoals rhythm section, but they didn't want to do it. So they never got really noted unless drummers like Dad or that would talk about them, going, go back
Hmm.
and listen to Chain, Chain, Chain.
Hmm.
Roger was 14, 15 when he played that track, but you've heard him,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
because
it's funny you say that, Sean. I had Gene Chrisman on with me last summer, and we were talking
Mhm.
about your dad, and he was talking about how he was living in Memphis, but getting work in Nashville, and he eventually just, like you just said, though, he really didn't want to move from Memphis to Nashville, but eventually said, "I got to move there." It's like that's where the work is now. So he moved up
Mhm.
to Nashville, but yeah, and it's interesting that what you say, we all these songs that we're talking about, so many masterful recordings and drummers that people don't know about, or maybe are just discovering now, but maybe
Well, I
not
mean,
credited at the time. And
some of the drummers that came to town, Dad, they didn't have any drums, or they were missing something, or whichever. Or one of them, his whole drum set got stolen out of his van, and it was like Dad would just said, "Go over to the storage locker, or the cartridge company, and grab a set of drums and cymbals and go take care of what you need to take care of," you
yeah,
know. Or they wanted a particular snare drum sound, and they're at a session, and the drummer calls Dad at at the other where Dad's recording, and he goes, "Can I borrow whatever, the 8-inch Radio King or whatever?" And they're like, they want that snare drum sound. They used it 2 days ago or whatever. And Dad go, "Come over and get it," and they
I could
run
see
a
that.
guy across the street and take it across the street, because at that time Nashville was 3 avenues of 1,500 recording studios. So every other building crisscrossing across the street, because they were all in houses.
Hmm.
They were all over the place. So it was like, even with Kenny Malone, Dad got hired for a session. He doesn't read. And the dad goes, "You don't want me on this session." He goes, "I don't sight read." And he goes, "But I got the drummer for you." So Dad found out where Malone was, and he was 2 studios over, and he calls Malone and he goes, "You come over here, do this session. I'll go over and do your session." And they were like, "What?" And he goes, "Look, Kenny can read this stuff. Kenny will play. I'll go that way." And Dad took his bass drum pedal, which you've seen it.
Oh
It
yeah,
like it weighed, it springs as tight as they can go.
yeah, yep,
Kenny brought his pedal. Dad took his pedal, and Dad went over and did that session. Kenny did this session, and they went on. You try to do that in LA or New York or anywhere else, a
no,
drummer
no,
is going to
forget
try and
it.
take your gig after that. But they
That's right.
didn't, because it was a family. That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. You wouldn't see that with guitar players or bass players or any of that. That was just something that, was just
yeah.
unprecedented.
Well, I know Eddie Bayers has spoken extensively about what your dad meant to him and how he helped him get started and was a mentor and I think a lot of drummers, the late Tommy Wells. I mean, there are a lot of people that
The cosmic flash that I used to call him.
Is
That's
that
what
right?
he came in at Nashville.
Yeah.
He came from Detroit, and he was I'm the Cosmic Flash, man. His long blonde hair and everything. He showed up at the
Yeah.
house, had his double bass drum kit, everything in the car. Next thing I know, it's in our basement, and you got him and Dad facing each other, and they're
Oh
trading
man.
licks. And Dad he goes, now are you done with all this mess? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, now do you want to know what it takes to play in this town? And he goes, okay. And then they started just playing different grooves, rhythms, and
Hmm.
whichever. And that's when Tommy was like, he realized Dad wasn't who he thought he was,
Yeah.
and it just all came down to family. And Dad did that with Tommy Wells, and he did it with you know Eddie and that, and because when Dad was hiring Eddie at the Carousel Club, he was a piano player. And
Right.
then during
Right.
breaks, they would go upstairs on that old Ralph Pace practice
Oh,
pad
practice pad kit.
setup.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And he would teach Eddie, on the practice pad kit. And that's how that all went about.
Wow.
And then it was, trying to help him along and teach him how different tunings and all of that, And,
Man. You know what?
that's what it is.
Yeah. What fascinates me, Sean, is that your dad's self-taught because, um, like I said, the first time I heard him play a solo, really sort of stretch, again, I'm gonna play something in a little bit that's going to demonstrate this, but anyone at first listen is going to think this is a really schooled drummer with a lot of chops and a lot of technique who's really worked at his craft, but then goes in and makes his living playing grooves and knows what to play for the song, knows not to play all this crazy technical stuff unless Adrian Ballou calls
It's
you.
called for.
Yeah, unless it's called for. But I'm going to play a song that one of my favorite songs that you told me that it's your dad, and I think I had a feeling anyway, but I'm going to play When You're Hot by Jerry Reed. And I think this is what's cool about this song is it's got some badass drumming in it. It may sound
Well,
like a simple
for
beat.
1971 and being country, when country didn't have a bass drum in it except for the chorus, and drums weren't up front, and they still didn't allow drums on the Opry. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
none of that was available then. And that's
Right.
when drums got pushed to the front. It was just like everybody in country was like, oh, okay. Now it doesn't sound that big, but if you play all the other country stuff from that time period, you listen to it and you're like, oh wow, there's no drums in any of this.
Right.
You
Right.
could breathe louder than the drums were.
Yeah, not the case in this song. The drums are really featured, and he came up with such a great part too. And again, you listen to what he's playing, and it's funky, it's groovy, and there's some, this is not a simple song by any stretch. So check it out, everybody. I think you'll dig this.
Jones and Big John Talley had a big crap game going back in the alley. And I kept rolling them seven and winning all them pots. My luck was so good I could do no wrong. I just kept on rolling and controlling them bones. Finally they just threw up their hand and said, when you hot, I said, yeah. When you're hot. And when you're not, you're not. Put all the money in and let it roll again. When you're hot, you're hot. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. When you're hot. Well, now every time I roll them dice, I'd win. And I was just getting ready to roll them again when I heard something behind me. I turned around and there was a big old cop. He said, hello, boy. Then he gave us a grin and said, look like I'm going to have to haul y'all in and keep all that money for evidence. I said, well, son, when you hot, you hot. He said, yeah, when you're hot, you're hot. When you're not, you're not. You can split it all down at City Hall. I said, yeah, when you're hot, you're hot. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. When you're hot. Well, when he took us into court, I couldn't believe my eyes. The judge was a fishing buddy that I recognized. I said, hey, Judge, old buddy, pal, I'll pay you that $100 a year if you get me out of this spot. So he gave my friends paid. He turned around and grinned at me and said, 90 days, Jerry, when you were hot, you were hot. And I said, thanks a lot. When you're hot, you're hot. When you're not, you're not. You let my friends go free and throw the book at me. He said, well, when you're hot, you're hot. I said, well, I'll tell you one thing, Judge, over the old pal. If you wasn't wearing that black robe, I'd take you out back of this courthouse and I'd try a little bit of your honor on. You understand that, you hillbilly? Who's gonna collect my welfare? Pay for my Cadillac? What do you mean, contempt of court?
That's a great song. Jerry Reed, man.
Well, the other part is dad started the whole na 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 na.
Is that right?
Na, na. Yeah, and he was when they were recording, and he started singing the lick, for the song while they were doing everything, and they gave Dad grief because he wasn't part of the singers union. So Chet said he doesn't need to be because Jerry's a musician who just happens to sing. So this is the musician's album, and everybody in the band is singing. So they got around the whole after BS mess only because the song was already done. It was released, and they had to redo the paperwork just so that they weren't getting fines and all this other stuff. But
All that, yeah.
it's just funny. But
Yeah. And what a great part he came up with for that song. I remember hearing that as a kid, 11 years old, whatever, when it was on the radio. And there were certain songs that you'd hear on AM radio as a kid that really stood out, and that was one of them.
Yeah, it was during that time period. Dad was playing. He went into another session there at RCA, and he was playing the Rogers kit, which is a double bass drum kit. It's dual 18s, 2 mounted 13s, and 2 floor toms, 2 16s. And Al Pachuki was miking the bass drum, but instead of he bringing out 2 mics, he brought out one. He put it in front of the left bass drum. Dad took the mic and stuck it between the 2 bass drums. And they told him to play, they wanted a train feel. And Dad was like, are you sure you want a train feel on this song? And producer at the time was like, yeah, I want a train feel on this, and it was Porter Wagoner. And so Dad coming from Detroit, Al Pachuki's got the microphones up, everything's up, and Dad counts it off, and it's boom, 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 boom. And Al Pachuki's trying to pull back faders and stuff, and he goes, they're hitting the talkback mic, and he's like, drummer, and train are you on? And Dad goes, well, I wouldn't have played that. He goes, well, what would you have played? And Dad pulled out the brushes, and he was like, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, that's that damn train you should have been on. So, it was just, that's the differences in terminology, because Motown, you want a train feel, you want this train moving down the road, not, a shuffle, not a Dixieland shuffle thing, because that's what Dad considered it as. And, but those are the weird, it's like, I don't want none of that iron, and Dad's like, iron, what are you talking about? He goes, that iron, those round things. I don't want none of that iron on my songs. He goes, that clothes one over there you can do, but that other stuff, none of that stuff. So that it's just whatever. It's,
Yeah,
it's
I
all
think
the
I remember
craziness
him.
during that time period.
I remember
He talked
him
about a lot of it during clinics.
exactly. Yeah, and it's absolutely, and we drummers know what that's like when you've got a guitar player, somebody in the band, whoever, a producer, someone trying to explain something to you and using some kind of terminology that makes sense to them that you have no idea what they're saying. And your dad always brought that humor, and yeah.
Well, it's
I
like
think,
three-legged dog. It's like
Yeah.
three-legged dog.
yeah, three-legged dog. I know.
It's like, okay, that's a three-legged dog. Okay, whatever. Don't just say put the snare on 4. leave it off on two. No, you got to think of a three-legged dog taking three steps and falling on the fourth. It's just like, okay, what, but you know, two-hump camel or whatever they came up with, it's
Yeah.
just crazy, stupid stuff. But
I
that's all
read,
that time period.
yeah, exactly. And I read somewhere where your dad, I'm going to show this photo of your dad playing with Elvis, and um, a quote from him where someone had, I guess, approached him to write a book or contribute something to a book, but they wanted like dirt on Elvis, basically. And
Mm-hmm.
and your dad didn't want to participate, didn't want to do it. And I just
Mm-mm.
thought that was so great because he said basically, I have great stories to tell about Elvis, but they don't want to hear that. They just want to hear all the dirt,
It was
the
during that term period where everybody was bashing him because of his weight and his drugs and everything else. And it was a sad time period because
yeah,
um, you know, to calm him down, they would give him downers to, wake him up. They give him uppers, and because he just couldn't rest or sleep or whichever. But, you know, there isn't anybody on tour right now that you have people, you know, pushing on a bus because they think they saw Elvis on the bus and are basically tipping it over.
hmm
That doesn't happen. Security guards and police and all of that, that whole thing was created because of Elvis. Now it's like
right,
there's barricades and all kinds of stuff that have been created to hold crowd control. There was none of that stuff during that time period, and
right,
people would try to shoot him, at his house, and or they would throw bombs over the fence that would explode because their wife or their girlfriend was more in love with Elvis than they were with them. And so these guys would do all kinds of stuff. I mean, one guy popped up in the middle of a sound check from behind a bunch of uh, seats with a rifle pointed right at Elvis. And he goes, if anybody moves, I'm going to shoot him. And dad's sitting right behind Elvis. And dad's like, great, it's going to go right through him and into me.
yeah. I've heard this
He goes,
story.
I'm
Yes,
done either way, And
yeah,
it's just like, but nobody realized what the stress of that notoriety was at that time. And,
yeah, yeah,
and that's what was happening. But they wanted to know all the other dirt on him, and it was just like, dude, there's not really anything. It is what it is. But it's
yeah.
like, instead of respecting that time period, it's, I look at some of the old pictures of dad playing drums, and it's like, you remember the old straight stands with
hmm
two cymbals and all of that? There was no boom arms or any of that mess. You didn't have racks that you could tilt your drums. All your drums had just enough tilt that you could tilt them, but they didn't
Yeah,
come up that far.
yeah,
You look at some of the
exactly.
old mounts and you're just like, oh my God, how did we accomplish this back then? You know,
Yeah,
it's a completely different, you know, time period, but from playing to artist, all of it is different.
yeah. And speaking of artists, I want to play this song. I know we're a little bit. I jumped from
Running behind.
Jerry Reed to Elvis. No, we're good. We're totally good. We'll be here all
Okay.
day if you let me. If you let me keep you here all day. No, I want to. I want to play another really really big song that your dad played on, Jolene by Dolly Parton, and this was probably a number
two
one
years. This was 2 years after When You're Hot, You're Hot.
when you're
Because
okay.
When You're Hot, You're Hot was a 71. Jolene was 73.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and by then was he really pretty established in the
No.
studios?
Oh, no.
Not
Mm-mm.
yet. Okay.
No,
No.
because
Okay.
he was having to do more. He was out on the road with either Boots or with, he'd been on the road with Boots. He'd been out on the road with Jerry Reed promoting the Amos Moses and, When You're Hot, You're Hot albums.
Mhm.
And he was also doing Jerry Lee Lewis, because he wasn't during that time period, like Kenneth Buttrey and Kerrigan and Chrisman and Buddy Harmon, they were still the first calls.
Mhm.
Dad was slowly getting into that, but he wasn't. He was doing a lot of the newer or people that were coming in from out of Nashville to record, like Joe Tex and Charlie Pride and, you know, that sort of thing, until they were like more established. But you would do a lot of demo work or lower end stuff. And as those artists moved up, they would keep you, you know, as part of the rhythm section because you've created this sound for them.
Right.
And that's what Dad was, you know. So it was probably right at the cusp of him establishing himself to start becoming, you know, a First Call or that in the, you know, that range. But, you know, I mean, at that time, there was so many artists recording here from all different genres that, you know, if you could keep 25 drummers that were all in that same league recording every day, doing 3 sessions a day. Yeah. There was a lot of stuff going on in Nashville.
Absolutely. Well, let's play this great song by Dolly Parton, Jolene, with your dad on drums, 1973.
Just because you can. Your beauty is beyond compare, with flaming locks of auburn hair, with ivory skin and eyes of emerald green. Your smile is like a breath of spring, your voice is soft like summer rain, and I cannot compete with you, Jolene. Talks about you in his sleep, and there's nothing I can do to keep from crying when he calls your name, Jolene. And I can easily understand how you could easily take my man, but you don't know what he means to me, Jolene. Jolene, 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 I'm begging of you, please don't take my Jolene, 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 please don't take him just because you can. You could have your choice of men, but I could never love again. He's the only one for me, Jolene. I had to have this talk with you. My happiness depends on you, and whatever you decide to do, Jolene. Jolene, 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 I'm begging of you, please don't take my man. Jolene, 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 please don't take him even though you can.
Man, what a perfect drum part. What a perfect track. Just his
Less is more theory.
Oh, absolutely, Sean. Absolutely. That was it to me. Like, you know, the older I get, the more I hear something like that and I go, man, that is just masterful. Just what he played there. It's just, it sits, it grooves, but not in like an overt in your face. It just moves along. It's beautiful. It's just, and who was the bass? Do you know who the bass player was on that by any chance? I should have looked that up. I didn't.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Not off the top of my head, no.
Really great.
During that time period, it could have been Henry Storlecki. Not sure, because he did a lot of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to move right along here because we actually have quite a few songs to get to here. And this was a couple of years later, and this was a big hit. And what I think is cool about including this is this is probably considered country. I mean, the artist is considered, I think, country, but this was such a crossover mainstream pop.
It was a country pop thing. I think you're going to go with England Dan, John Ford Coley.
I sure am, buddy. That's it. I'd
So
really love to see it tonight.
This was also one of the first songs that Dad did with adding electronics.
Yes, and I wanted. So, should we talk about that on the other side of it? We'll play the song, and you can.
Yeah, it does matter. Yeah.
Okay, and we'll just, because you and I we talked about this a little while back, but the tom fills are they're sort of they've got electronic drums triggered. It's acoustic and electronic.
Well, it's acoustic and electronic. It's a pearl fiberglass kit back in the day, concert tom kit.
Yeah.
And the kick, snare, and toms had the toms had Barkusberry pickups, guitar pickups, triggering syndromes for added tom tone. And then the snare and the kick had a Barkusberry pickup on it, triggering a snarey sound just to give it more snare sound, the snares themselves. And then the bass drum had the old Sennheiser headphones that used to have the yellow foam or the red or the blue foam on them. That was stuffed between the head, the batter head, and the bass drum pillow as where the pickup was for the for the bass drum, but that became the pickup, just using the headphone in reverse.
Yes.
Trigger. But that's what was added on this particular song. And the drum booth that this was recorded in was probably about the same amount of space as a 4x8 piece of plywood. That's how, because the drum set that Dad got from Pearl, they had to cut the bass drum down because it wouldn't fit through the door of the drum booth, because the drum booth door was actually a closet door. So he had to have them cut it so the bass drum was shorter. So it was a 22 by 14, because with the hoops and all that on it, it wouldn't fit,
Man.
So that was this time period.
Wow. Awesome. Well, let's play this. We'll play this track. And I just want to say, my buddy John Haga has said that Bobby Dyson was the bass player on Jolene. Thank you, John. Bongo Johnny, and old buddy of mine from up in Minneapolis. All right, so let's play this track. This is and still one of my favorite songs. Beautiful, beautiful love song, and with Larry playing some even more beautiful drums. Here it comes. Really Love to See You Tonight. England Dan, John Ford Coley, 1976.
Hello, yeah, it's been a while. Not much.
Beautiful cross stick too. Plays in this.
I'm not sure why I called. I guess I really just wanted to talk to you. And I was thinking maybe later on we could get together for a while. It's been such a long time, and I really do miss your smile. I'm not talking about moving in, and I don't want to change your life, but there's a warm wind blowing the stars around, and I'd really love to see you tonight. We could go walking through Windy Park, take a drive along the beach, or stay at home and watch TV. You see, it really doesn't matter much to me. I'm not talking about moving in, and I don't want to change your life, but there's a warm wind blowing the stars around, and I'd really love to see you tonight. I won't ask for promises, so you don't have to lie. We both played that game before. Say I love you, then say goodbye. I'm not talking about moving in, and I don't want to change your life. But there's a warm wind blowing the stars around, and I'd really love to see it tonight. I'm not talking about moving in, and I don't want to change your life. But there's a warm wind blowing the stars around, and I'd really love to see it tonight. I'm not talking about moving in, and I don't want to change your life. But there's a warm wind blowing.
Man, what a beautiful song. Beautiful playing. I mean, he just played the perfect part for that song. Yeah.
It
Epic.
was I remember that one only because I was there when they were recording this, but that's because it was done by in the studio at sort of about that size. That's a different studio, but
Okay.
same. That's the drum set though.
I wondered if
But
that was the kit. Okay. Yep.
That's the kit, but that was after we had re-drilled the kit for the new Pearl hardware on for tom mounts and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the fiberglass kit with we'd taken the covering off of it because it was deadening, because it was only wrapped around, so the material wasn't attached to the shell itself really. And Dad felt that it was deadening the kit, but it's also called the signature kit because every artist that he recorded with, they signed the kit, and it sits in storage. But that song was recorded at Lee Hazen's by the Pond out in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and it was right on Old Hickory Lake, and that was during the time period of the pocket fishermen. And I had one. I was outside fishing in between them, doing their session stuff. So
Yeah.
that's the only reason I know exactly that setup, because it was like I was there. So it was funny.
And do you have a lot of his old kits still, Sean? Are they still in the family? Like that old Pearl
I
set?
have most of the old kits. I have that Pearl kit. I have its sister version, which same toms, but different bass drum. I still have the Elvis Presley kit, which was the last kit that was out with Presley that did the last two shows that Elvis ever did.
I was going to say that. Yeah. Yep.
I have the Yamaha recording kit that Steve Perry, not Raised on Radio, but the Street Talk album was done.
Yeah. Yep.
O'Sherry. And then I have, the last three DW kits that Dad had. And then I also have the Rogers kit. Yep. That's the Steve Perry kit for Raised on Radio. That's got that 70s period Black Beauty.
Oh yeah. Look at that.
Yep. And then all the other, electronics that he was using at the time.
Yeah, I want to talk about that for a second too. That's a great segue, but that was a question I was going to ask you, and there it is. So it's a Black Beauty on O'Sherry.
Mm-hmm.
What a snare
that's
sound.
that ebony pinstripe.
Yeah,
you can see the white line for the pinstripe, and fiber skin 2s on the bottom, and then Emperors on the top.
Emperors on top. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Man, yeah. Well, we're going to get to that as well. I know a lot of folks are asking about that. And I just had a second ago one of your dad's rack systems up here. I want to just take a second here because, I think if your
the rack system that you saw before in that Perry thing was the custom rack before you went to the rack that you guys had with the DW when you were there.
The Dynacord stuff. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, no, this is the D drum, the original D drum on the bottom, which he picked up when the trade show was in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Yes. Yep.
Then the D drum 2, which is the one that we worked on, the first one that we worked on with them, and then I helped design the 3 after that. Then the S900 Kai, which is above, which is
Yep.
weird because he ended up having to buy it from a Kai, even though they took all the drum samples off of the Journey album. And
Oh my.
they gave everybody in the band an S900, and they ended up giving the S900 to Mike
Beard?
Baird instead of Dad, even though they were all Dad samples. And then the SP12, which he used for small rhythm click track, that because Dad, even though there's a lot of drummers out there that hate click tracks, Dad didn't mind a click track as long as he was the only one listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason being is that they wanted the songs to start the same every time once they found a tempo, and then allow them to move from there. So Dad would use it to start the tempos, and then if the band wanted, if the music was moving up or down in tempo through them playing for the song, he wanted to be in control of it. But he also didn't like when they gave him a click that it was only on quarter notes, because you're sitting there and you're playing and your kick is on 2 of the quarter notes, the snare's on the other 2 quarter notes, and you're playing a hi-hat pattern that's on all of it. So he wanted something that was in between, so that as he's playing, he's not trying to rush and drag, trying to find the click because he's on top of it.
Yeah.
Because when you're on top of it, you can't hear it.
Yep.
So he had all this other pattern stuff so that he could hear where the click was and it wouldn't affect what he was playing.
Yeah.
So he could tell where the click was, because he might keep the kick on the quarter note, and the snare would move just behind the quarter note to lay the rhythm back while the hi-hat is staying up top. So you're moving it back and forth depending on whether you're in the verse or the chorus or on the outro, so that you feel like you're pushing it on the out, so you're on top of it. You're laying back in the chorus, in the verse, and then you're playing on top of it or on it during the first chorus, and then in front of it on the next chorus or whichever. He wanted to be able to move that. But,
that's why
the way of using it to help you than it is to go, well, I don't play to a click. I'm like,
right.
Okay. And even when he was on tour, he would play to a click, because he wanted the tour he didn't want, if the band's feeling down, he didn't want them to start the song too slow, where you come off of a song and you're all hyped up and now you're going into a ballad, and now the ballad's too fast. Because he had to do that with Don Everly. Don Everly would start one song and it would be like and Dad's like, we're off to the races, and he would have to, in that first bar, bring the band all the way back, and and it would be Lucille, so it'd be Lucille, please don't have me alone, Lucille, please don't. It's just like
rein it in.
It was like, So it was like, he's like, Don, here's the tempo, and he'd be shaking his stick at a tempo, and but inevitably Don would just look at the crowd and go, but that's why you're looking at things and trying to go, why are we doing this? And it was like, Dad uses it. It wasn't a crutch. It was like, just another tool to use.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that, Sean, and I was going to just say that the songs that I know that we're going to get to in a second, where he played to a click, they breathe like just, organically the way a song should. It doesn't have any sort of a stiff, tight feeling. And I didn't realize until you just explained how your dad implemented the click, like where he would, he used it as a reference, but there were spots where, and Jeff Porcaro did the same thing, where he could, for his own means, manipulate and push himself a little ahead of it, behind it, but always knowing where it was. And you make a great point about, if the other musicians are listening to the click, then they're liable to just be right on it with it and fighting your dad if he's trying to just make it breathe more, you know? So they
Well,
should
he's
use your
allowing
dad
the
as the,
band to breathe, and he's holding them,
That's right.
in
Yeah.
a certain area. But it was like that. I'd really love to see it tonight had a click,
it did.
but nobody
Okay.
knows it.
Yeah.
But during that time period, you're talking about Dad, Garen, Keltner, um,
Jeff. Yeah.
James Stroud, Jeff Porcaro, all of those guys all had clicks, but none of them wanted the rest of the band to listen to it
Yes. Right. Right.
because the artist or the producer wants you to start the song at the same tempo every time
Yeah. Yep.
until they get the take. But most of those guys were, first, second take done. It's the guitar players that had to sit there and fix the part.
Well, I'm gonna make a left turn here, moving through some music. This is really a treat. This is Adrian Belew, Twang Bar King is the record from 1983, and you were kind enough to let me. You said you pick anything you want, and I thought this tune, I Wonder, is such a cool tune to hear your dad playing some like serious prog, like fusion-y stuff that.
Hey, he's just a country drummer now.
I was going to say,
he's just a country drummer.
I bet people had no idea that he could pull this off, but man, does he ever. This is such a great track.
This is all thanks to Bill Bruford, because Adrian was calling Bill. Adrian wanted it to feel like he wanted all these songs to feel like they were in 4/4, typical groove, because he was trying to make a commercial album. And Bill was like, I don't do this. You need to call Larry. And
That's so
Adrian
great.
calls Dad, and Dad's like, I don't play this stuff. Call Bill. And Adrian's like, Bill told me to call you. So this is how that all came about.
Oh man, this is great. Another
And this is at the same time when
Dad.
Dad did Justice Swingin' with John Anderson and the O'Sherry album and all of that. All this is happening at the same time. So it's like, yeah. Mm-mm.
Yeah, versatility personified. So here comes I Wonder from Adrian Belew. Oh man, I had to play the whole thing. Oh, that ending is too cool. Oh, awesome, awesome. Well, I'm
It
gonna,
was interesting. It was interesting seeing that live
yeah.
at the 83. I think it was 83. It was the 83 trade show in Chicago because they played the Limelight
Oh wow, yeah.
during the during NAM that year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about this earlier, and I'm going to play a little bit of this. This is some video. It's the quality is not fantastic, but it's absolutely worth playing. This is some footage of your dad at Zildjian Day in Boston that we were talking about. And
Oh, so you got the footage that I don't have.
you know where I got this? I actually found it on YouTube. I didn't even know it existed. But I'll send you this MP4
Link.
when we're done. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no,
But
because I asked Zildjian because it was in their archive, but I couldn't. They at that time they were like, no, we can't let anything go. I was just like, I just want to archive it for myself. You know.
you know, I
Yeah.
feel like I came across some stuff when I worked there. I came across some old tapes when I first started working there, and there was some stuff. It might have even had your dad, and then mysteriously, I'm not making this up.
It
We couldn't
disappeared.
find it. Yeah, it disappeared, and it's a little bit strange. But
Yeah.
anyway, this was on YouTube. Someone had it, and the quality actually gets a little bit better. But I want to share this with everybody. This is Zildjian Day, Boston, 1983. I'm going to quickly set this up. Sean and I talked about it
He's
earlier.
playing hands.
He's playing hands when he starts. This is the shirt from that day. I'll show this when we're
Yeah.
done. Still have the shirt. And, you know, I venture to say not many people before the show knew who Larrie Londin was, but everybody knew who he was after because I'll say this.
This was where he didn't want to do he normally would come out and talk. We talked about this, and
Yeah. Yep.
he looked out in the audience and it was all jazz guys and metal players, and dad was just like, I'm not doing this. And he just walked out and started off with a drum solo. And then after it all, he walked out front and said, all that's great, but it doesn't pay the bills. Now let's get down to actually talking about what actually makes a living.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know?
I remember that. I
So,
do. I remember that. Yeah. My jaw was on the floor just after seeing him play. I won't play this. It's about 4.5 minutes. So I won't play the entire solo, but I'll play some good bits of it, and everybody enjoy this. Berkeley Performance Center. Recognize those 16th notes, everybody? Double strokes. That's the end of the tape. Unbelievable. He just...
No, I just watched a YouTube with the drummer that was out doing that.
Oh, Greg Bissonette. Greg.
Yeah. So Greg's talking about how a lost art is playing the hi-hat, while they're playing, other parts, and you'll have this little chunk pattern going with the hi-hat. And it was something that I was like, I never even thought about it, because during that time period, it was kind of like all drummers did, still had a hi-hat pattern going while they were doing other things. And now it's kind of a lost art. But just seeing that, and then seeing Dad doing his hi-hat pattern, his chunk pattern with his left foot. And I'm like, oh yeah, Greg just, But that's all, drummers talking about stuff is just, that's what I miss. I miss all the drummers getting together and like what they used to call drummers collective or whatever. But it was like, they all, hey man, are you doing this? Are you doing that? Have you tried doing this? Try doing that? Just different pattern stuff,
Absolutely. It's, my comment about that is I remember going there and having a really good idea of what it was going to be like to see Steve Gadd. I loved Steve Gadd. I was really into him at the time. Still am, of course. Vinnie Colaiuta, who I'd recently discovered, a couple of years before playing with Frank Zappa. This is 1983. First time seeing Vinnie. First time seeing Steve Smith, though I was a big fan of his with Journey. And I kind of knew what I had a really good idea of what all these guys were going to sound like and how they were going to play. So your dad comes out at the very beginning of the show. And I mean, he completely, he just blew the doors off the place. And and I've said this to Steve Gadd and Steve Smith and Vinny and all those guys who are my friends. Peter Erskine was there that day. Your dad stole the show. I mean, he stole the show. He came in there and the expectations were like, oh, this guy, Larrie Londin, he's a session drummer in Nashville. He plays on big country songs, but he's not Steve Gadd or Vinnie Colaiuta. Well, check him out. I mean, his chops, his technique. Anyway, I could go on and on and on, but I thought it would be better. I'm gonna slide this little surprise in here right now. I thought it would be better if a friend of both of ours gave a little commentary on this yesterday. And we're nearing the end, so I thought this would be a good time to do this. Yesterday, I reached out to a good friend of ours, Steve Smith, and asked him to say a few words about your dad, knowing the sort of history, and we'll get to that in terms of the Journey connection. But I just thought this would be a nice time to play this. So here's Steve Smith.
Hey, Sean. Steve Smith here. And I first met your dad, Larrie Londin, on the original Zildjian days back in 1983 in Boston and then in Chicago. And I had heard him on albums, but really had no idea about the chops that the guy had. We all knew he could groove, but he had some wicked snare drum chops, including this double stroke roll that was just amazing. So we had fun, we hung out, and then fast forward to 1985, where I was having trouble playing along with a click track. I had never played with a click track, and in 1985, when Journey was making Raised on Radio, they decided they wanted to put a click track on every song, and it was a struggle for me. I ended up playing quite a few songs on the album. I ended up on 3, but Steve Perry, who had fallen in love with your dad, Larry, because he did such a great job on his solo album called Street Talk, recruited Larry to come out from Nashville to Sausalito, where we were recording, and redo the entire album. I know that Larry was played some of the tracks that I did, and 3 of the tracks he said that he couldn't improve, which Steve Perry told me later. So those are the 3 tracks that I'm on. And also, if you listen really closely, you'll notice in some of my tracks and Larry's tracks, some of the tom sounds were a digital drum called the Dynacord. So I had a Dynacord set up, and I used it on some of the, I'm only on 3 tunes, but there's one of them, I think it's called Eyes of a Woman, with some cool tom part that I came up with. That's the Dynacord toms, and Larry called me and asked if he could borrow my Dynacords, which I was happy to let him use those drums on the album, and he did, and he did an amazing job, like such powerful, straightforward, in the pocket drum tracks on that album. So he really, I think, rose to the occasion and helped the group complete their mission and make that album. So Larry was a lot of fun and a pleasure, and such a beautiful man, and I just had a great time hanging with him. We spoke after that, no hard feelings at all, and so the rest is history. And love the guy, and you take care, and Johnny D, we'll be in touch. Okay, talk soon, bye-bye.
Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah. Dad went when he went out for that, and they played the 3 songs that, Steve was talking about, and Dad was like, he listened to them, and he was just like, there's nothing for me to do. He goes, it's where it needs to be. Just leave it the fuck alone. Pardon my French, but that's what Dad would say to him, and did say to him. And it was just like, so they just stayed the way they were, and they worked on the others. And I remember the Dynacords being borrowed because there wasn't a sampler that he could sample with that he had in his rig. And he goes, by the time I do all of that, we could already just let's make a phone call. Yeah. And Perry wasn't wanting to do it, but Dad was like, I'll just call him. Let's just get this over with. Yeah. And they brought him in, and they did the stuff, but
it says a lot about Steve too. I could imagine the blood between Steve.
It's hard during that time period because the label wanted certain things. They put Perry in charge. That the band was kind of like in a flux, and it was like, I'm just a hired guy coming into play. That's all it was. And same thing with Randy Jackson coming in to play bass. Right. And that was during that time period, there was a lot of bands that were bringing in other musicians to accomplish getting a song done, not wanting to destroy the band. Just the labels asking for it, they're playing the money, so it's not in our hands anymore, and that's what it was. And it was like, and as Dad would say, Smitty, or Steve Smith, it was like, he was like, Smitty was like, just do your thing. Let's get this. And even he at that point in time was like, can we just get this album done? We just want it done. Because they were all under the gun from the label. And it was just like, we just want to get it done. We don't care what it takes at this point. Just do it. Get it over with,
Well, I remember Steve, when I got to really know Steve Smith around 89 or 90, him telling me basically this story. And I just found it so great that because I knew your dad from DW, and I liked him. I just liked him as a person, as a drummer. And I'm thinking, I hope there's not some weirdness. I don't even know how it came up. And Steve, I'll just say Steve Smith was not the least bit bitter about being dismissed from Journey. He had moved on at that point. He'd formed Vital Information even back then, and he was, he never really missed a beat. So, and I remember him being very forthcoming about the whole process. And he said, I never played to a click. Steve Perry wanted it to sound the way it sounded on his solo record, and I can't play like that. And Larry's a master at that. So they had Larry come in, and he didn't tell me this at that time, the story about borrowing the Dynacord, but I could see him kind of just going, yeah, of course, you're a drummer. You're my friend. We've hung out together. I'm not going to say, no, you can't borrow my Dynacord electronics, to your point, Sean,
and
it's the drummer thing.
Yeah. And it's the thing is that they were asking for a certain type of groove pocket that they wanted. And that's why it was like on the other 3 songs, they were more jazzy rock instead of R&B rock. And Dad was basically a 2 and 4 through the floor guy. And Smitty had this movement, this like ballet in the middle of his playing that Dad didn't do. And that's why it was like, Dad's listening to the rest of the track. And he's like, I don't do all of that. This is Smitty's world. You leave it alone, and that sort of thing.
That's a great way to describe it, Sean. That's well said. Well, let's play the song that I know a lot of people have been wanting to hear. This is Oh Sherry from Street Talk, Steve Perry solo record from 83, probably recorded 83, but released in 84, I think. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
In that time period.
Big hit song. And again, masterful. To me, Steve Perry, one of the great singers of all time, without a doubt. The drum track makes this song. Sorry, Steve. Sorry, everybody. But this drum track is a masterclass. Here we go. Just everybody knows.
You should have been gone, knowing how I made you feel, and I should have been gone after all your words of steel. Oh, I must have been a dreamer, and I must have been someone else, and we should have been over. Hold on.
Wow. Talk about a perfect track. I mean, if you asked me the definition of a perfect drum track, that's it right there. That's it. You could not, to quote your dad, you couldn't improve on that. You couldn't. You could not improve on that. That was just masterful. I listen to that song. It's 40 years old, Sean. I listen to that song probably a few times a week when I go out running. It's in a playlist. It's just, and I'll admit I'm listening mainly to your dad. That's what I'm listening to. It's so inspiring. His part, his technique, the way he put those little hi-hat 16th notes or double strokes, whatever they are. It's just like all those accents at the end when they're doing the coda, the chorus, and he's hitting all those little China accents. Man, it's perfect.
It was, it's funny because everybody oohed and awed over the little 9-stroke roll on the hi-hat, and they were all like saying it was an overdub until, at trade shows, and I'd sit down at a little kit and play it, and they're like, oh, that's how it was played, because he plays the 9, hits the snare, then goes back, and
that's
it's
right,
a swap of hands. And
it's
he goes,
strokes,
I did it on a Charlie Pride album in 1974, and nobody gave a shit. He goes, now 10 years later, and everybody's like, ooh, wow. He's like, whatever.
Oh, man, that sounds like your dad.
It's like, he could care less. He goes, you're worried about a 9-stroke roll. He goes, what about the song? Did you like the song? Did you, it was like, because he didn't care about his playing as much as he cared about the song,
Yeah.
I remember. And another thing, just because of talking about, because I'm looking at all the symbols, that you got on the wall and everything else. And you saw how hard Dad plays.
Yes.
But what's funny is that during that time period, even up until later, all of his crashes and everything were extra paper thin crashes,
Mm-hmm.
And he played a ping ride that he, had the largest bell he could get at the time, only because he liked to use it as a cowbell, but he wanted to be able to ride it, crash it for a deeper crash, and then go right back to riding it without sustaining. And the reason that all the cymbals were paper thins is because he could hit them and then they dissipate and be gone. They wouldn't sustain for long periods over, for the songs.
Yeah.
But it's like, I've looked at cymbals today that say they're paper thin, and I'm like, they're not paper thin.
They're not paper thin.
The ones that Dad had are like, they're like this.
Real paper thin. Yeah, I'll bet they're beautiful. Yeah.
But he didn't break any of them. And that was what was so weird,
Yeah.
But that was that time period. So when you're hearing them, you're like, to try and recreate that, I have to go back in the vault,
Yeah, his I'm glad you mentioned that too, because his sound, his cymbals, his drums, everything, that snare drum and O'Sherry, the Ludwig, I mean, just fantastic. I'm going to play one more song. I've kept you here a long time today, and I so appreciate it.
I don't. It's whatever you need, bro.
Well, thank you, buddy.
I'm here for you.
You are the best, and this is a song that I think it'd be a good way to sort of cap things off. And this followed right after O'Sherry. It's that period we were talking about recording with Journey. This is "Be Good to Yourself," which is a real favorite of mine on this record. It's "Raised on Radio," which was the record we were talking about, that he came in and replaced most of Steve's tracks. This is such a great,
this is going to a Pearl kit.
And this is going, okay.
Street Talk was Yamaha.
Yep.
This is a Pearl kit.
A Pearl kit. Okay,
so
good to know.
They know. So
yeah, thank you. And I was going to say, again, this is, again, a great example of your dad's vocabulary, his versatility, and going from what we've been playing earlier to, this is just an all-out Journey rocker, I mean, he's going like full throttle in this song, and play some great little triplety things with his bass drum, had a great foot. I don't think people realize how great he played double bass drums, but he had a great right foot that could play all this really cool triplety technical stuff and tasty. So yeah, let's play this tune, "Be Good to Yourself."
Running out of self-control, getting close to an overload.
What a great example of just the way he grooves on that song is just untouchable.
It's,
It's a
as he
lesson.
said, 2 and 4 through the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that he did and more. Just amazing. Just an amazing drummer. And, just he's missed, I know. And, but as I said at the very beginning, thank God there's so much great music that he created that we can listen to, and appreciate his drumming forever.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm lucky that I can still at different times be in a restaurant or a store or whatever, and they'll play something that he was on, from country to rock to whatever. And so he's still always a part of my life, and that, it is, it's a nice thing. And at times it's a sad thing, but not as much as it is a, exciting time period. And if it wasn't for Lissa,
Yeah.
I
Yep.
probably wouldn't have that many pictures.
I know. I
You
know.
know,
I
I
wanted,
mean, she
God bless
captured
Lissa.
a lot of photos of Dad, that were from a lot of different time periods,
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
different setups, and that sort of thing. Um, and then I'm lucky that there are people that are out there that they'll still send me songs that I didn't know Dad was on, or tracks and stuff from different musicians when they're going through their archives and go, "Oh, did you know your dad played on this or your dad played on that?" And I've slowly been building up more and more of an archive of different stuff of what he has played on, and that, more just for my own, you know, history of remembering things. You know,
Yeah.
it's like it's like the Motown songs and stuff, like the one that you brought up before we even started this today, where, Benny and them were sick. Dad had to fill in, and played on different tracks at Motown and stuff.
Yeah.
But doesn't really get credit for it. But it's just remembering those times and remembering things, because it's like it's been so long since talking about it or any of that you forget it until somebody says something and it triggers something, a response or a thought or a memory or any of that.
Yeah. I just think it's great that you were such a big part of it too, Sean, that your dad made your whole family be part of his life the way he did, like that you were at all these events. I've known you 40 years, or more, from trade
More.
shows and more. Yeah. And from just, you were part of that scene, and thanks to your dad
Well, I
wanting to
started
include
doing
you.
I started doing electronics and audio engineering and all of that back in the day. So at the very, um, I mean, I was designing drum carriers for marching and that with Al Duffy at Pearl. And then I started working on a lot of the triggering and wiring of Dad's rigs. And basically, he had his own electrician or engineer designing stuff in the house. So it was
Yeah.
like we would
Yeah.
sit down and redesign stuff. And that's how I built the relationship with my father, because he was gone so much. But then, I started doing a lot of stuff on the side, and it branched off to me doing other things in the industry. But if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have had it. But Dad and mom owning a drum shop,
Of
Dad,
course. Yeah.
doing his thing.
Right.
Everybody
Right.
thought it was Dad's drum shop, but it wasn't. DOG stood for Deborah Otolo Gallant Percussion, the DOG, and she was the top dog. So it was her place. But,
Yeah.
I was going to trade shows with her to buy equipment, for the store, and Dad was there doing clinics. So it
Yeah.
was like, and that's how, I got to know you when you were first with DW. And then the next thing I know, you're back all the way across the nation and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
Zildjian.
In the
I
cold
was just
weather.
like,
Yeah.
weren't you just over here? You know,
Harder to hit a moving target, Sean.
yes, it is. But that's the time period that we grew up in and stuff. And
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
for any of your people that are out there that are, there's a lot of stuff that we didn't touch, but if they've got questions, they can send them through you or whatever, and
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
or give them my info, and I'll try to answer other questions because there's a lot
I
of
know.
stuff. I mean, that there's songs that Dad played on that all he did was play his stomach, his knee, and stomp his foot on the floor because there was no drums. They forgot to bring drums, so and it made #1 hits, and it was just like, that's why I look at people and go, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Are you making the song happen? And that's, it's like,
That's cool.
just
Man.
make a living and be happy.
Exactly. I know. And I do apologize to everybody that we really, there was certainly more we could have got to today, but such is the case when you're talking about Larrie Londin, the great Larrie Londin, and there's just hard to get it all into, well, we've been going almost 2 hours, but maybe 2 days we could get closer. But Sean, thank you so much for being here
If
today.
you got
my
other
friend.
questions, you want to do something else, just let me know.
Absolutely will. Absolutely will. Yeah.
Very lucky to have been here. So
Very lucky to have you here with me. Thank you. Everybody, big hand
welcome,
for
sir.
Sean Gallant London. And I call you Sean London, but I call you my friend, good man,
yes.
and old friend. Thanks for watching,
Yes.
everybody. Hang tight if you would,
Be
Sean.
good, people. Enjoy playing.
We'll see you soon, everybody. Again, thanks for watching. All right, well, that's my show. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, leave me a comment. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you can listen to the podcast on all podcast platforms. And a reminder, Live from My Drum Room t-shirts are available in sizes extra small to double XL, $25 in the US. That includes shipping. Here is my Venmo payment information at John-dechristopher-2. And don't forget to include your size and your shipping address. Very important information. 100% of the proceeds for all t-shirts go toward a scholarship I've created with the Percussive Arts Society. You're donating to a great cause when you buy one of these t-shirts. So once again, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Remember, no drummers are harmed on any episode. And drummers, when in doubt, leave it out. See you soon.